Ruth sat by the window of her bedroom, staring out at the sprawling fields beyond the village. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in a golden glow, but its warmth did nothing to chase away the chill that had settled in her heart. She could hear the soft hum of life outside, children playing, neighbors chatting, birds singing, but the sounds felt distant, as though they belonged to a world that no longer welcomed her. It had been 7 years since she married John, and what had begun as a union filled with love and promise had slowly turned into a nightmare of quiet desperation. They had been happy at first, deeply in love and full of dreams for the future. Their wedding day had been a grand celebration, and John's family had embraced Ruth with open arms, praising her beauty, intelligence, and grace. But as the years passed and their home remained empty of the laughter of John's children, the warmth from his family began to fade. What had once been a loving relationship between Ruth and her mother-in-law, Mama Ijeoma, now felt strained and cold. The whispered conversations, the disapproving glances, and the unspoken accusations all weighed heavily on Ruth's soul. Her heart ached with every reminder of her failure to conceive. Every monthly cycle that passed without the hope of a child felt like a cruel reminder that her body had betrayed her, and the pressure from her husband's family only made the pain worse. In the beginning, Ruth had been the perfect daughter-in-law. Mama Ijeoma adored her. She would often boast to her friends in the village about how lucky her son was to have married such a good woman. Ruth had always been kind, respectful, and diligent in her duties. She worked tirelessly to ensure that the home she shared with John and his family was kept in order, and she cared deeply for her in-laws. Mama Ijeoma had welcomed her with open arms. "You will give us many strong children, Ruth," she had said with a smile the day after the wedding. "John has made a fine choice." Ruth had smiled shyly, filled with hope for the future. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, of raising a family with John, and she had no reason to doubt that those dreams would come true. But after a year of marriage, the questions began. "Ruth, is there any news yet?" Mama Ijeoma would ask gently at first, her tone curious but hopeful. "Are you feeling any different?" At first, Ruth had been able to brush off the questions with a smile and a promise that it would happen in time. She and John were still young, after all. There was no need to rush. But as the months turned into years, the tone of the questions began to change. "Why haven't you given us a grandchild yet?" Mama Ijeoma would ask, her voice tinged with impatience. "What is the delay?" Ruth felt the weight of those questions more acutely with each passing day. She had visited doctors, herbalists, and traditional healers, searching for answers. Each time, she returned with empty hands and a heavier heart. John, ever supportive, had reassured her that it didn't matter to him. "We have each other," he would say, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "That is enough for me." But Ruth knew it wasn't enough, not for his family. The change in Mama Ijeoma's attitude toward Ruth was gradual but undeniable. The once warm and affectionate mother-in-law became distant, her once soft words turning sharp. The questions about children grew more pointed, and the conversations about family now seemed laced with bitterness. One evening, after dinner, Mama Ijeoma called a family meeting. Ruth had been in the kitchen, cleaning up, when she overheard her mother-in-law speaking to John in the living room. Her heart sank as she realized what the conversation was about. "John, it's been 7 years, Mama Ijeoma said, her voice low but firm. "How much longer are you going to wait? How much longer will you allow this situation to continue?" John sighed, his voice weary. "Mama, I've told you before, Ruth and I are doing everything we can. These things take time. Time? Mama Ijeoma scoffed. How much more time does she need? A man your age should have children running around the house by now. What kind of future are you building if you don't have an heir to carry on your name? Ruth's heart pounded in her chest as she listened from the doorway, her hands trembling. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but the words were like knives being driven into her chest. She had always feared this moment would come, that the love John's family had once shown her would turn to resentment. Mama, I love Ruth, John said firmly. I won't abandon her just because we're having trouble conceiving. We are doing everything we can. Love is one thing, John, Mama Ijeoma replied, her tone softer but still filled with urgency. But duty is another. You have a responsibility to this family, to this lineage. If Ruth cannot give you children, perhaps it's time to consider other options. There was a long pause, and Ruth could feel the blood draining from her face. She knew what was coming next. You could take another wife, Mama Ijeoma said quietly. You could marry someone else and still keep Ruth as your wife. Many men have done it before. Ruth's breath caught in her throat, her heart breaking at the suggestion. The thought of John taking another woman, of her being pushed aside because of something she couldn't control, was too much to bear. John's voice was firm as he replied, Mama, I won't do that. Ruth is my wife. We will find a way. But Ruth knew that this conversation was far from over. As the weeks passed, the pressure on Ruth intensified. It wasn't just Mama Ijeoma who questioned her now, it was the entire family. John's brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, and even distant relatives who only visited once a year began to offer unsolicited advice and thinly veiled criticism. Have you tried seeing a different doctor? One of John's aunts asked during a family gathering. Maybe it's something simple that can be fixed with the right treatment. Or perhaps you should go for more traditional remedies, another relative suggested. I know a woman in the next village who has helped many couples conceive. Maybe you should visit her. Ruth forced herself to smile and nod, pretending that their words didn't sting. She knew they meant well, most of them, at least, but it didn't change the fact that their suggestions only deepened her feelings of inadequacy. Everywhere she went, she was reminded of her failure. In the village, women her age were surrounded by children, toddlers clinging to their skirts as they went about their daily tasks. The sight of mothers holding their babies, of children playing in the streets, was a constant reminder of what she couldn't have. But the worst part was seeing the way people looked at her now. In the early years of her marriage, she had been admired and respected. But now, there was a different kind of look in their eyes, pity, judgment, and sometimes even disdain. John, to his credit, remained by her side, unwavering in his support. But Ruth could sense the strain in him too. He loved her, she knew that, but she could see the toll that the pressure from his family was taking on him. He was caught between his loyalty to her and the expectations of his family, and it was slowly wearing him down. One evening, after another tense dinner with the family, Ruth couldn't take it any longer. As soon as they were alone in their bedroom, she broke down in tears, her body shaking with the force of her sobs. John, I can't do this anymore, she cried, her voice filled with despair. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay. Your family, they want you to marry someone else. They don't want me here anymore. John gathered her in his arms, his voice soothing as he whispered into her hair. Don't say that, Ruth. I won't leave you. I won't let them force me into something I don't want. But how much longer can we keep going like this? Ruth sobbed. I've tried everything, John. I've done everything I can, but it's not working. What if I can never give you a child? John pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. His eyes were filled with love and determination. Then we will find another way. We can adopt, or we can just be the two of us. But I won't abandon you, Ruth. You are my wife, and that's all that matters. Ruth wanted to believe him, but the weight of the situation felt too heavy. The whispers, the judgment, the constant reminders of her failure, it was all too much. And she knew that no matter how much John loved her, the pressure from his family would only grow stronger. The turning point came one fateful afternoon when a woman named Erica arrived at the family compound. She was introduced as a distant cousin of one of John's uncles, a beautiful young widow who had lost her husband to illness. She had come to the village to visit family and, as Ruth soon discovered, to be considered as a potential second wife for John. At first, Ruth thought she was being paranoid. She didn't want to believe that her mother-in-law would go behind her back and arrange for another woman to take her place. But as the days went by, it became clear that Erica's visit was no coincidence. Mama Ijeoma took an immediate liking to her, lavishing her with attention and praise. She invited Erica to every family gathering, introducing her to some relatives and making sure she was always seated near John. Ruth watched in silence as her mother-in-law slowly began to orchestrate Erica's integration into the family. It wasn't long before the rumors started circulating. People in the village whispered that Erica was a perfect match for John, that she would give him the children Ruth had failed to provide. The gossip grew louder with each passing day, and soon, Ruth couldn't escape it. One afternoon, as she was walking through the market, she overheard two women talking. "Have you seen the new woman staying with John's family?" one of them asked. "She's beautiful, and I hear she's already been married before. She'll have no trouble giving John the children he needs." The other woman nodded. "Yes, I heard the same thing. Poor Ruth. It's only a matter of time before John marries the new woman. That's just how things are." Ruth felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. The world around her blurred, and she sat on the floor beside a stall. The weight of the words pressed down on her, suffocating her with their cruelty. People outside her home were privy to everything going on in her marital life, and everyone seemed to want her marriage with John to come to an end. It wasn't long before the rumors reached John. One evening, after another family dinner where Erica had been given a place of honor at the table, John confronted his mother. "Mama, what is going on?" he asked, his voice filled with frustration. "Why is Erica staying here? What are you trying to do?" Mama Ijeoma didn't even try to deny it. "John, I am doing what is best for this family. You need children, and if Ruth cannot give them to you, then Erica will. She is a good woman, and she is willing to be your second wife. There is no shame in it." John's face hardened. "I told you, Mama, I am not taking a second wife. Ruth is my wife, and I won't betray her like this." But Mama Ijeoma was not easily swayed. "John, think about the future. Think about the family. You cannot let your love for Ruth blind you to your responsibilities. This is about more than just the two of you." Ruth listened to the arguments from the other side of the door, her heart breaking with each word. She knew that John loved her, but she also knew that the pressure from his family was becoming unbearable. How long could he continue to fight for her when everyone around him was pushing him in the opposite direction? The tension in the house reached a boiling point a few weeks later. The pressure from John's family, the constant presence of Erica, and the weight of Ruth's own guilt and shame finally became too much to bear. One evening, after a particularly tense family gathering, Ruth made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a home where she felt unwanted and unloved, constantly reminded of her failure to give John the family he deserved. As John lay asleep, Ruth quietly slipped out of bed and began packing her belongings. Her hands shook as she folded her clothes, her mind racing with the enormity of what she was about to do. But she knew it was the only way. She couldn't stand in the way of John's happiness any longer. If Erica could give him the children he needed, then Ruth had to step aside. It was the only way to free both of them from the suffocating expectations of his family. With her bag packed, Ruth wrote a brief note explaining her decision. She told John that she loved him, but she couldn't bear to be the cause of his family's unhappiness any longer. She asked him not to come after her, to let her go so that he could move on with his life. With tears streaming down her face, Ruth slipped out of the house in the middle of the night, leaving behind the only life she had known for the past 7 years. When John woke the next morning to find Ruth gone, panic gripped him. He searched the house, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. It wasn't until he found the note she had left on the bedside table that he understood what had happened. His heart sank as he read her words, his hands trembling with anger and sorrow. He couldn't believe that Ruth had left, that she had felt so trapped and hopeless that she thought living was her only option. Without wasting a moment, John rushed to his mother's room, his face twisted with fury. "Mama, Ruth is gone," he shouted, his voice thick with emotion. "She left because of you, because of this pressure you've been putting on her to give me children." Mama Ijeoma sat up in bed, her face pale. "What are you talking about?" "She's gone, Mama," John repeated, his voice breaking. "She left because she couldn't take it anymore. You pushed her too far." Mama Ijeoma stared at her son, her expression indifferent. "John, just let her go. This is what is best for you." "What's best for me?" John spat, his eyes blazing with anger. "What's best for me is Ruth. I love her, Mama, and I won't let you or anyone else take her away from me." Without waiting for a response, John stormed out of the house, determined to find Ruth and bring her back. It took John 2 days to find Ruth. She had gone to stay with her parents in the next village, and when John arrived at their home, he was met with worried glances from her family. "She doesn't want to see you," Ruth's father said quietly as he stood in the doorway. "I'm not leaving until I speak to her," John replied, his voice firm. After a tense silence, Ruth's father relented and allowed him inside. John found Ruth sitting in the small living room with her mom, her eyes red from crying. When she saw him, her face crumpled with emotion. "John, please don't." But before she could finish, John crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I'm so sorry, Ruth," he whispered into her hair. "I'm sorry for everything my family put you through. But I can't lose you. I won't let them take you away from me." Ruth sobbed into his chest, her heart breaking all over again. "I left because I didn't want to be a burden to you anymore. I can't give you what they want, John. I can't give you children." "I don't care about that," John said fiercely. "I care about you. You are my wife, and I love you. We will find a way to be happy together, no matter what anyone else says." Ruth said in soft tone, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But your family. They will have to accept it," John said firmly. I will not take another wife, and I will not let them dictate our lives anymore. We will find our own way. Ruth stayed in his embrace, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. She had always known that John loved her, but hearing him stand up for her, hearing him choose her above everything else, gave her the strength she needed to fight for their marriage. Together, they returned to their home, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. 3 months later, Ruth, who was expecting her period as usual, was shocked when she realized that a month had passed and she hadn't had her period. She visited the hospital quickly to confirm what she was suspecting. By the grace of God, Ruth was pregnant. And from the doctor's report, it wasn't just one child, twins, triplets, but Ruth was pregnant with quintuplets. 5 different lives were growing inside her. She rushed home and gave the news to the entire family. Mama Ijeoma could not believe her ears and fainted. She had always wanted a grandchild from John and Ruth, and it seems the news of 5 babies was too much for her to comprehend. When she regained consciousness, Mama Ijeoma begged Ruth for forgiveness, realizing that she had made a mistake of wanting to replace her with another woman. She personally packed Erica's items and made sure she left the house that very day. Ruth gave birth with 0 complications to 3 charming boys and 2 beautiful girls, and the tension that hovered over the family dissipated into nothingness. In the end, Ruth and John found peace, not because their circumstances changed, but because they chose to face their challenges together. They refused to be torn apart by the expectations of others, choosing instead to define their own happiness. The moral of their story is clear: true love is not about fulfilling the expectations of others, but about standing by each other through the trials of life. In the face of pressure and adversity, it is the strength of love, loyalty, and mutual respect that sustains a marriage. Ruth and John learned that their worth as individuals and as a couple was not defined by their ability to have children, but by the love and commitment they shared. And in the end, that was enough. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like this. God richly bless you. Catch you in the next video.